Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 27 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. It's been a while since I invited my husband, Rodd Stockwell, onto the Intimate Marriage Podcast. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I really love having you on for a few different reasons. One is I've actually heard from multiple listeners that their favorite episodes are the ones when you come on and just share your experience, what's real for you in a very genuine way. And also it shows the audience how you and I communicate with one another in a way that is just different to experience it versus my talking about it.
Absolutely.
So I was listening a number of reasons. That's one. The other is that it always is sort of like, adding a little bit of hot sauce to our relationship to discuss something in a way that serves other people, but also expands our sense of one another and what we get to be together.
Yeah. To share it means we get to put a flashlight on it.
Yeah.
Or a spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, since it's been a while since you were on, and I have so many more listeners than I did before, so a big hello to those of you who've been listening for a while, and certainly a warm hello to anyone for whom this is the first episode. What would you like people to know about you in case you're a new voice to them?
Well, I would like them to know that it's important to know yourself to be an active and helpful participant in a relationship. And so all of the personal growth that I've done in my life very much informs how I show up in our marriage and in our life together.
Yes, it does, which is good for you and good for me and good for us. I think I'll also add, I guess it's in the intro, but we've been married for 27 years. We have 4 children. And I'm reminded in this moment, there are various people who have said this, that no one is married to the same person all of their lives. We all have multiple marriages. It's just some of us are blessed enough to have each of those marriages with the same person. And so I feel like
we've had a lot of different marriages and different phases in our marriage.
Yeah. And sometimes the transition from one phase to the next was seamless and elegant. And sometimes it was super rocky and raw. And after going through enough of those kinds of phases, I think it feels beautiful to be confident that whatever comes next, it will be our next phase.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Well, with that introduction, I want to focus on something very specific, which you uniquely are in a position to address. And I'm going to take a moment to really set up the conversation because I, of course, am a woman, and I think this is what I'm about to say is true for most powerful, intelligent, educated, ambitious women, that we're used to perceiving things and knowing how things can happen well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be successful in whatever ways we are, personally and professionally and academically and so forth. And so when things arise in marriage, it's just very straightforward to be really clear when I'm going to tell you, when I used to tell you, how it should be and how it needed to be and what your impact was and what your impact should be on me or on our children or whatever the situation would be. And from my point of view, I would be expressing myself with a certain amount of, well, let me just say that initially I compromised with success. I was so good at compromise and I didn't make fusses and I didn't really authentically express myself. But once I learned to not be afraid that I would be too much, to be able to actually share what was alive in me, sometimes very tender and gentle, but sometimes with some ferocity. And I would do that in service of more connection, more authenticity, out of a devotion to be true to myself in the context of our marriage, knowing we both believe in that. And I had no idea how internally debilitating that was for you. And I think men don't tend to show that to their wives. So that's the setup. And I'd love to hear what you say about that before then going into the evolution or the solution to this particular dilemma of a dynamic.
Well, what I would say is that the man's point of view on that, or the man's experience on that, at least for me, there were kind of two experiences. One is, this is too intense, this is too much, whatever this particular interaction, conversation happened to be. I need to leave. Like, I want to have a break. I need to decompress. I need to turn off for a while because that was just so intense, whatever that was that just happened.
Yeah. And just to be clear, when you said you want to leave, you don't mean you want to get divorced. I mean, you might have thought that sometimes, but I believe.
No, I mean, like, I need to turn on the TV and veg out for a while because that was a very intense thing. Whatever, different people have different men have different things they do to veg out and have nothing in their consciousness. And anyway, that would be one experience to point to on the flip side of what you were just talking about. And then the other masculine experience is the experience of looking to my woman to know what to do in a heteronormative couple, meaning I want her to be happy. I want to make this work. She seems to know what she wants or what the solution is. I'm going to look to her to find out what I should be doing or what I should do. That's the other experience from over here that you're talking about.
Yeah. And so now stepping outside of talking about our marriage for a minute and speaking as the intimate marriage expert and relationship and intimacy coach that I am, I want to say that I see this play out in a few different ways in many marriages. There are the men who become acquiescent and their wives don't realize how impactful this is. And there are the men who get angry, but don't necessarily, I mean, there's some who then blow up in response and it just feeds on itself. But there also are the men who become angry or overwhelmed or anything that leads to resentment. And instead of addressing the issue head on, it comes out in a very sneaky, sideways way with just behaviors that, with, emotional flirtation with a colleague or doing something away on a work trip, which is not part of the marriage, infidelity, or having some kind of underhanded or overt addiction. In other words, this dynamic that we're describing leads to all kinds of behaviors, which typically in the marriage, neither one of them would feel good about. And the man is hiding from the woman, but it is a coping mechanism for the intensity of the kind of dynamic that I am describing, that for you, it involved either needing to just shut down and check out. And I'm grateful it didn't lead really to anything more than that, although I never endorsed shut down and check out. It drove me crazy and I became more intense. But the point is, that was a relatively harmless response. Or to just kind of completely acquiescing and saying, okay, she knows, so let me figure out what to do that will make her happy based on what she's saying. And on my side, that's also not satisfying, because on the one hand, I knew what I wanted. And on the other, that is kind of like a parent-child dynamic, which is super frustrating too. So anything else that you want to say about this whole dynamic in our marriage or in general?
Well, I think the bigger issue you could also point to here is, as a man, what do I want? Like, am I getting the full range of experiences with you or with my partner that I want? As a man, I start to feel like every time we interact, it's you complaining or me acquiescing or some stereotype of an interaction. Then I'll start to crave having other kinds of experiences, or even I won't notice the moments when you are being supportive or kind, or, that we're quietly enjoying each other's company. Like I'll gloss over those in my mind because this dynamic needs to be addressed.
Okay, well, I am so grateful for you describing that. I think, honestly, we could do about 12 podcasts just looking at different facets of what's been discussed and how to navigate them. And my purpose today really was to kind of land in this terrain, this complicated, relevant, for us familiar, and I'm guessing for you listening also familiar, whether it's a terrain you're in often or just occasionally. And let me also add that avoiding this kind of dynamic leads to what I generally call compromise, toleration, kind of dialing down self-expression and just focusing on keeping things peaceful so as to avoid the kinds of dynamics that we're describing now. So again, there is so much more to say. And honestly, if you're listening and there's some aspect of this or a phrase that Rodd has said or I have said that you'd like me to pursue, please go to my website, alexandrastockwell.com, go to the contact page and send me your question or your request, and we'll be very glad to expand on any particular theme in an upcoming episode. But in the meantime, I want to say that some time ago, I was coaching a couple that was in this dynamic on a very regular basis. There was more time with this kind of intensity when neither of them were working and the children weren't around than there was time outside of this dynamic. And so I asked you if you would have a conversation with the husband in this couple, because I think you have a way of describing how you navigate this, which, I navigate it from a different angle. And I just thought you would really be able to speak in a certain way that this particular man would understand. And that is exactly what happened. It was really beautiful. And so I'd like you to make that available for everyone listening. So there are many ways out of this dynamic, and I have a lot to say about them that have to do with a woman taking more responsibility for her desires, her impact, the way that she expresses them. And in fact, let me just say that if you're in this kind of a dynamic, one of the most simple ways out of it is to go through my online program, The Aligned and Hot Marriage. Every single module, they're many of them quite fun to do, but they will give you the toolbox and the mental perspective and the kind of heart connection to be able to navigate these kinds of circumstances proactively so they never even arise. And when they do arise, you'll know how to get out of them. So I think the first thing I really want to say is, if this is landing with you, please go to alignedhotmarriage.com and sign up. It's a relatively small investment for the return you get, which is the tools to have a peaceful, sexy, exciting marriage. And also, I would love for you to describe if, like what I'm saying is that if you don't want to be in these kinds of circumstances to begin with, then I highly recommend the Aligned and Hot Marriage Program. But if you're in these circumstances, especially if you're a man with a woman who has emotional intensity and throws daggers and vents and spews, and you're really uncomfortable, then I invite you to listen closely to how you might think about it and navigate it. So what would you say? I'm sure there are many couples listening who are going to think, oh, let's do the Aligned and Hot Marriage Program. That's clearly the most comprehensive preventative move. But for those where this is the dynamic, is not going to change.
Well, this is supplemental.
Yeah, this is supplemental. Okay. So anyway, go ahead. If I hadn't changed, how did you become so much more comfortable and triumphant in being present in these kinds of circumstances?
So I think it's most helpful to think about the second case I was talking about, where I, as the man, am kind of looking to you to see what should I do? Like, what is it that she wants here? What will be helpful? How can I be the most helpful to her? What does she seem to be asking for?
I just want to say that I find this so fascinating because you and so many other men are leaders, completely ultra competent in professional contexts. And yet in this dynamic, you just want to know what to do because she must know better.
Well, and it's paradoxical because she is showing up in front of me, telling me what I should be doing. So it's like, makes sense that she seems to know what is needed. Anyway, that's not my point. Okay. My point is that instead of looking to her to figure out what to do or what's needed, you need to look inside. I needed to learn how to look inside. I needed to learn how to have my own independent assessment of what was going on and what was needed, separate from yours. Now, it's easiest, and it was for at least for me, to first practice cultivating my own point of view, if you want to call it that, separate from you being in the room. Like me sitting down with a journal, let's say, my journal or some paper and pen, and just like writing my stream of consciousness thoughts about what's going on or what the situation is. In fact, it's probably easiest to practice this with non-charged things and then to build it up and do it about something that's a recurring pattern in our marriage or something. But the point is that as soon as I have my own assessment and my own point of view, then all I need to do in the moment is to value my point of view equally to yours, or maybe a little more, just as an exercise, because I was so used to valuing it less. And so therefore, when it's a question of what to do or what to say next or whatever, to come out of my assessment and my point of view about what's going on. And the thing that was amazing to me is that it almost, at least in the beginning, it was amazing. It would have this amazing effect on you when I did that your nervous system calmed down, the intensity calmed down. It was like we hadn't ever spoken about it consciously, but your system craved a certain stability of point of view coming from me. And so when I could access my own point of view from myself, then it actually changed the dynamic dramatically between the two of us.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that can be a little frustrating when I have conviction and you see it differently and I'm right, of course. So then it's very inconvenient that you see it differently. However, it's also true that I crave connection with a real man. And if you are just taking all of your cues from me, then I feel like I'm in a conversation with myself. And that is super annoying. So when you are connected with yourself and interact with me, kind of imbued with the connection you have with yourself, something completely different is possible within me and between us.
Right. And so what I would do in the moment when you're coming at me with some intense request or point of view or whatever is inside my own mind, instead of asking myself, what is she saying and what does she want me to do? I would say to myself, okay, what do I think is going on in this situation? And what's my perspective? What's my point of view? And then my goal is just to share my point of view and to take what you said. You may not have said, by the way, Rodd, I have a perspective about this I want to share with you. You may have said, this is how it is. This is what's going on, blah, 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 blah. But I can pretend that you said it that way. And I can say, oh, well, I hear you say your point of view. This is how I think about it. Can we talk about this? So that it changes the dynamic from trying to get to a solution to two equals talking about their point of view. And that also goes a long way.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about it, even now. Like, we're not in a dynamic like that, but it feels so good. So will you bring in the image that is so helpful in the moment? Because sometimes when a husband is triggered, like, it's hard to keep all of these measured thoughts straight. And in that instance, it can be very helpful to just evoke
the imagery. Yes. So my imagery is I am an oak tree and you are the windstorm. So she comes in blowing and whatever with what she's saying. And my job is just to be the oak tree standing there, and my leaves can be rattled a little bit, but fundamentally I'm not moved.
Yeah. And there's a way that you developed doing that, so that for me, in conversation with you, it feels completely different when you are shut down and ready to dissociate, go scroll on your phone or whatever it is you're going to do, even if you're standing there looking like you're in the conversation, but you're ready to check out. That feels totally different than when you are in the conversation, essentially the same posture and gaze, but you are feeling like a rooted oak tree. And yes, your leaves are blowing in the wind and maybe some branches are not so stable, but fundamentally the roots are strong and you are not going anywhere. And the only thing that is eventually going to change is the windstorm is going to become calm.
Right. That's right. The oak tree just waits for the weather to change. One day it's rainy, one day it's windy, one day it's sunny, and the oak tree is steady and calm the whole time.
Yeah, but I really want to emphasize that steady and calm, just waiting, feels completely different than internally shut down and ready to check out or already checked out. And I think it feels different to you too. That's kind of your point, but anything you'd add to the difference?
That's why this is also the solution for the first scenario that I described earlier, because when I'm in touch with my point of view and therefore I'm an oak tree inhabiting my perspective and my point of view, there's no need to check out, because there's a part of me that's connected to my roots and connected to the earth. And so the thing that might have appeared so intense and overwhelming is just some hot air. That's how you should think about it.
I'm ready to feel insulted, but it feels so good. It's like mentally, I'm like, I reject being described as hot air, but you're talking in this luscious way that my heart is opening and I feel loved and honored. And if that's the dilemma, then we're in a very good situation. Okay, well, you're so articulate, and this is hard-won wisdom and truth for you.
That's for sure.
Anything else that you want to add to men or women in heteronormative committed relationships who are listening to this conversation?
Well, again, I just want to reiterate that whether you're a man or a woman, if you have the experience of feeling blown away by your partner or some of the intensity that they bring, that taking some time by yourself to cultivate being in touch with your own point of view and then honoring your own point of view, that your point of view could be just as important and valid as your partner's perspective, goes a long way to developing the roots of your oak tree.
Beautiful. And I think the one thing that I'll add is that if you're a man and you recognize what we're describing, then please know that, of course, you're going to have your own flavors of this. So one of the first things to do is recognize your own response when this happens. So, Rodd, you've described a desire to just check out and veg out, and the attitude that, well, if I'm saying all this, I must know, so you better get in line with what I'm saying, much like a child is obedient with a parent. And for other men, the response may be more kind of anger and keeping a lid on it. It may be resentment. It may just be like fight, flight, freeze, or faint, whatever your particular flavors of that are. The first step really is to recognize, oh, you're having one of those experiences. How can you be an oak tree in this moment? I think that's the simplest next step. And if in the moment it feels overwhelming, we are here to tell you there is loving, erotic, affirming, interdependent possibility on the other side of really giving yourself attention while navigating this dynamic.
It's well worth developing your oak tree.
It's well worth developing your oak tree. Somehow,
for both of you,
I think we can play with some innuendo in that, but we won't do that during this episode.
A big oak tree.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off here and wish you all the best in times of storms and calm weather.